23 days of Halloween. Day 2. Traumatizing stories. When I was 16, I was in a summer work exchange in Quebec, Canada. One night I invited a friend from a program to stay over at my family's home for the night. We slept downstairs in the basement, and they had a couch and a spare mattress down there. The actual event is quite fuzzy, but I remember waking up, sensing something was wrong. I looked up, and there was a shadowy figure in the shape of vaguely a person above me. The figure grabbed my breast. I didn't know how to react. In my brain fog, it seemed the figure went back upstairs and out the front door. I laid there for a moment, in the darkness, and noted that the stuffed animal I slept with, I was young and it was a gift from my boyfriend, was several feet away from the head of the mattress. Once I was slightly more coherent, I began to shake and knew I had to let the people I was staying with know. I went upstairs to the family on the main floor and noticed that the front door was wide open, with the sun just beginning to rise. This is when I realized that something fucked up had just happened. I hurried up to the top floor where the bedrooms were and whipped on the lights in the parents' room. I tried to explain that someone had been in the house and grabbed me, but keep in mind I was 16 years old and in a huge panic, and my many years of French immersion in school did not teach me the French words for breast or home invasion. The family mother seemed pretty pissed that I had woken them up. It took a lot of broken French and hand gestures to get the point across, but they did contact the local police and they sent over an officer who thankfully spoke English. Nothing came of it, and my friend who slept over slept through the entire thing. That occurred almost 15 years ago, and I still think about it now. I'm a surgical resident, and I went to an assist on a euphemistically called harvest. A 9-year-old kid had been hit by a car and had been pronounced brain dead on the scene. His family wanted his organs to go to good use eventually, so we went there to collect the organs. He came in on a ventilator, but with his heart beating and seemingly alive. We opened him up end to end, got ready to clamp off all the major organs, poured in ice, and then took them all out. I met the guy who got his kidney and another guy who got his liver. The liver guy would certainly be dead without it. The kidney guy, probably. His other kidney and heart and some of his guts all went to good uses. As much as I knew, he was already dead. But it was still difficult to come to terms with. What is life? That was definitely the most creepy for me. I work in family medicine now. I was 7 years old. My two sisters and I were home alone at our new house that wasn't finished. No phone or nothing installed as yet. Mom was in the city for a few hours and she was pretty far away and wouldn't be home until late. The house is out in the country with a quarter-mile of gravel road. Closest neighbors are just under 2 miles away. We were playing Uno or something when our dog started barking like crazy. My sister, who was either 11 or 12, went outside, and there was an old, creepy-ass pale green van driving down our driveway. They stopped halfway down, and one person got out and approached the dog. It was a nice dog, not really scary or aggressive at all, and went up to the dude, and he got our dog to get in the van. Then they kept driving towards the house, so my sister came in and locked the doors and started freaking out. After 5 minutes of hearing our dog's muffled barks, we started hearing a bunch of banging on the doors, like people were trying to get in, so we went downstairs to let them see people were there. It was there that 3 dudes dressed in all black, wearing ski masks, became visible. One of them was a little person. They just stopped and waved at us. They tried even harder to bust the door down and break the windows and shit. Our windows were these thick-ass double-pane semi-plexiglass things that are apparently impossible to break, as far as these people were concerned. But we went upstairs and hid in the attic, fucking armed with a hammer and some screwdrivers, and they continued for like an hour, banging on shit, screaming that they were gonna get in and we should just let them so they wouldn't have to hurt us when they did. It was fucking terrifying. Anyway, after that hour we heard them drive off and waited like 20 minutes. Then my sister went and let our dog in and brought her to the attic. Like 2 hours later, someone came to the door and rang the doorbell for like 15 minutes straight, knocking and ringing the doorbell. We never checked, but I assumed it was the same people. Fucking still periodically have nightmares about that shit. It was 20 years ago. Sorry for the horrendous writing. It still bothers me just thinking about it. My childhood home was straight up haunted. My sister frequently complained about faces in the lights. My brother, who was maybe 5 at the time, came running in the house crying because the man hanging in the garage scared him. There was nobody there. I once woke up to a dark figure standing over my bed, and I slept on the floor of my parents' room for days after that. There was an honest-to-God cave in the basement, dirt walls that went back maybe 15 feet. I never went in there, so I can't say what was in it. Electronic devices would sometimes turn on by themselves, or our dog would stare at one corner in the room and start to growl. Eventually, we ended up buying our neighbor's house right across the street. One night after the neighbors had moved out, but we hadn't yet moved in, my whole family was asleep. It was the middle of the night. Suddenly, the fire alarms start going off. We all wake up and my dad checks the house. Everything's fine. He takes the batteries out of the alarms and we all go back to bed. An hour or so later, we wake up to the alarms again. This time it's the carbon monoxide detectors and the no battery fire alarms. No battery. My dad turns off the alarm, we grab blankets and sleeping bags, and we leave. That night we sleep in the big huddle in the living room of our new house. My parents called someone to check the carbon monoxide at the house, and they report back that everything was normal. The next day we started moving into our new home, and I've never experienced anything paranormal since then. Back when I was about 6 or 7 years old, I had a few friends who would get a little bit carried away with our games of make-believe. More often than that, they'd wind up scaring themselves with some imaginary scenario or another. To the point where I'd get in trouble for making them cry. One boy in particular was pretty bad about that. We'd be pretending to be exploring some cavernous temple or raiding an ancient tomb, and he would grow so terrified that he would be unable to move. The fact that we were actually in my mother's closet didn't matter to him, because as far as he was concerned, we were lost, and the zombies would be catching up to us soon. He'd start wailing, my mother would come running, the sound of her footsteps only serving to frighten him more, and then we'd be forced to play something less nightmare-inducing, like farmers picking tomatoes and putting them away. On a more memorable occasion, I was the one who was brought to tears, and all it took was a small pile of sand. My parents had arranged for me to have a friend over one afternoon, and although I'd known the kid in question for quite a while, I never did get to the point where I understood him. He had this odd habit of assuming that everybody around him could hear his internal monologue, and he got really confused if you asked him to clarify something. As such, when he suggested that we pretend to be demolishing an old office building, I didn't much make any effort to question it. We marched through the corridors, smashing through walls and furniture alike, and laughing in deep, throaty guffaws that was probably sounding very mature. I was just about ready to detonate the charges lined in the building's foundation when my partner suddenly announced that he was bored. The statement snapped me back to reality faster than anything else would have, because when he got bored, bad things happened. Well, I stammered, thinking as fast as I could. What do you want to play? The boy considered for a few seconds, idly tapping a stick. I used the brief moment of silence to ransack my brain in search of some new game to keep him occupied. The last time he'd gotten bored, we'd somehow wound up explaining why the bathroom had been flooded, and I wasn't too keen on a repeat of that experience. Before I could come up with anything though, my friend looked at me with a wide grin. "Let's be mean to Rodney," he said. I sighed and rolled my eyes. Being mean to Rodney was an ongoing adventure wherein we'd wander around the yard, which was supposedly Rodney's house, and make a mess of things. I never found out who Rodney was or why he was so hell-bent on making him miserable, but I was somewhat hesitant to press the matter, and you'll see why soon. From my perspective, all the game really involved was me imitating my friend's actions while he described what we were doing. "This is Rodney's television," he'd say, "and we're switching all the channels." Then we'd move to another room, where we'd encounter Rodney's bed. Now we're crumpling up all of his sheets. This would go on for a while, with us flushing all of Rodney's toilet paper, removing the cushions from his couch, annoying his pet bird, whatever else came to mind. The game always ended up with some big finale that was a bit more destructive than the rest of the pranks, like causing Rodney's oven to explode or something similar. On this particular day, though, we never got to that point. In fact, that was the day when Rodney finally got a break from our incessant torment. We had been going about our usual mischief, my friend leading the way and me half-heartedly playing along, when we came to this little piece of sand. The game was always based off of things in our actual environment, so naturally we had to include it. "This," my friend stated evilly, "is Rodney's muffin." With a villainous laugh, he brought his fist down on the mound, causing dust to fly in all directions. I moved to imitate him, but I couldn't find the strength to do it. My imagination had finally started working with the game, and all I could see was a smashed bit of baking. To this day I have no idea why I was so moved by that, but I felt myself choking back tears of remorse. I turned to my friend as calmly as I said, and with a shaky voice I suggested that we try being nice to Rodney for a change. I don't know if it was the tears in my eyes or the appeal of a new game, but my friend quickly agreed. He started running around Rodney's house, not only fixing the things that he damaged, but actually making improvements to them. I'm not entirely certain how he managed to unflush the toilet paper, but again, I didn't question it. When everything was fixed, we kept right at it, going as far as to buy Rodney a new car and build him a mansion. We even made a cake, with which to surprise him, although I personally wouldn't have eaten it. From that day forward, we were never mean to Rodney again. In fact, it was like something had broken inside my head, because I found it very difficult to even imagine unprovoked cruelty after that. I'd also like to think that I was a positive influence on my friend, and that I really made a big difference in his life. Of course, I could be reading way too far into it, but something tells me that I did a good deed. See, my friend's name was Rodney. I was once mugged and attacked by a bunch of thugs on a subway train. I was 13 years old in Brooklyn, New York, just a week or two after my 13th birthday. Friend and I went to a movies about once a week. Normally we went to see one of several movies that were at different movie theaters in my neighborhood. But there were the times when the movies he wanted to see, he always picked the movie I didn't really care to choose, wasn't playing in the neighborhood. So we would sometimes go to a theater outside of his neighborhood. This particular time we would go way out to Manhattan to see the movie. I have long since forgotten the title. We took a train to Manhattan, saw the movie, and took the train home. Because we lived in different neighborhoods, we had to get off at different stops. He got off at his stop, and I had to continue to the last stop so that I could catch a connecting train to take me home. The subway car I was sitting in was completely empty. So was the car next to it. After sitting there in the empty car, I don't know what possessed me, but I decided to move to another car instead of sitting there in the empty car. I got up and moved to the next car where there were people. I decided to move even further to another car again, but some leather-jacketed guy in my path stood and told me that the other train cars were closed. I knew this guy was full of it, but I didn't want any trouble from him, so I said, "Oh," and turned around and went back into the empty car. I took the seat that I was in originally before I'd gotten up. That guy and his friend took my response as a sign of weakness and cowardice, which it was. I was a meek little 13-year-old, put upon abused kid with no confidence whatsoever. I was sitting there in my seat when a metal dart landed on the floor at my feet, followed by an angry, gruff voice yelling, "Pick it up! Pick it up!" I looked over to my right, and the leather-jacketed guy and his friend, around a half dozen or so, poured into the car and came straight at me. His dart guy friend was one of the first to reach me, as he ordered me to pick up the dart again. I did so, and when he ordered me to hand it to him, I did. Then he proceeded to throw the dart directly into my legs over and over again. I screamed and cried. I put my hands over my legs in an effort to shield them. But then he ordered me to move my hands away or else. I did, and he proceeded to throw his dart into my legs again and again as he stood over me. My memory is a bit hazy as to what happens next, But I do recall that after the dart throwing, they proceeded to use me as a punching bag, fists flying into my face, chest, stomach, not one of them at a time, but several of them at the same time. I managed to break free of these guys. I made a run. I managed to make I managed to break free of these guys. I made a run for the car door so that I could escape into the next car. But one of them was guarding the door. This guy was not taking part in my torture with his friends. He stood at the door as lookout. I could sense that this guy has some... I could sense that this guy had some compassion for me. That he felt some sort of guilt. Which is why he wasn't taking part. But I reached the door and he still prevented my escape. I yelled, I screamed, I cried, I begged him to let me go, but he wouldn't. He threw me back to his friends. That guy, keeping me trapped in the car with his friends that very second, was the worst feeling ever. Somewhere along the line, I found myself on my knees on the floor of the subway car. I reached into my pocket and pulled out all the money I had on me at the time. All the money I had in the world. A single dime. I held it out to them in the palm of my hand above my head and yelled that it was all I had. Please take it and leave me alone. I felt a leather-gloved hand press into my palm and take the dime. But they still weren't finished with me. One of them got the bright idea that he wanted to see my head go crashing through one of the windows of the subway car. So they grabbed me and actually started to ram my head right into the glass of one of the windows. Fortunately, subway car windows are strong and shatterproof. They had to be, due to all the vibrations it takes from a moving train. I can't recall how many times they rammed my head into that glass. Somewhere from a half a dozen to a dozen before they gave up. Just before we reached the last stop, I was on my feet. I opened my mouth to say something, can't recall what it was, and accidentally a little spittle came flying out of my mouth and landed on the leather glove of one of the attackers, which earned me a slap in the face. Finally, we reached the last stop. The doors opened, and they ran out of the car, except for one guy who I assume was their leader. The same guy who at the beginning got in my path and told me that the train cars were closed. He reached into his pocket, pulled out his wallet, and asked me if I needed a couple of bucks. I couldn't believe it. I didn't want anything from him. I refused his offer and he put his wallet back and walked off the train. I went to the front car to report to the conductor that I was attacked. I banged on the door, but there was no one there. I walked off the train onto the platform. I changed platforms. Saw a couple of cops with their backs to me. They were exiting the platform and going by the stairs. I called out to them, but they didn't hear me. I was too weak from the beatings to run after them. They disappeared out of my sight. it was just as well. I never memorized my attackers' faces, as I tried not to make eye contact with them throughout the entire ordeal. I'd forgotten what they had looked like within seconds of them leaving the train, and I would never be able to give an exact positive description. I never knew their names, and they never knew mine. Defeated, I caught my connecting train, and this time finding and staying in a car that was reasonably filled with normal-looking people. The second I got home, I flopped into bed to go to sleep, and when I woke up the next morning, my body ached all over. I imagine my attackers, if they're still alive today, are somewhere in their 50s. They were all a few years older than me. I estimate late teens to early 20s. Some of them no doubt have families of their own, wives, grown kids, homes, jobs. But I'd also bet they kept it a secret from everyone in their inner circles about the time they mugged and physically assaulted some young kid, a total stranger, for kicks on a subway train. My life at the time and many years following was terrible and painful for many reasons. Granted, they're not to blame for the entire terrible state of my life, but what a rotten life. I've never forgotten or forgiven them for the torture they inflicted on me both physically and mentally, and I hope they all burn in hell. When I was 5 or 6, my mom and I were walking down the creek bed near a house in California. It was the middle of summer, so it was dried out. My mom saw a hornet's nest and walked past it first, wanting to make sure that it was safe for me. Well, they attacked, and my mom dropped her glasses. I ran after her trying to grab them and got stung multiple times, quite painfully, mostly in the face. The next half hour was my mom basically blind, walking the half-mile back to the house with a crying 5-year-old on her back, trying to navigate. Now, if I ever hear buzzing, I start to panic, and have full-on panic attacks when a wasp or hornet is in the same room as me. You know that thing that kids do when they push you before grabbing you and then say that you saved their life? That they saved your life. Well, some kid did this to me when I was standing at the top of a waterfall during a hiking trip at a summer camp when I was young. He didn't manage to get a good hold on me, and I tumbled over the side, but managed to grab hold of some rocks, preventing me from falling. I'm not even sure how far down into some jagged rocks I would have fallen. One of the camp leaders pulled me back up, and the kid was sent home for the summer, but I've been terrified of heights ever since, and absolutely do not trust anyone to stand within 10 feet of near me or a ledge of any sort. Even people I completely trust and otherwise can't come near. I will scream and lay down flat and try to prevent the chance of someone pushing me accidentally over. I'd say that the event that traumatized me enough was only 3 years ago. I'm the youngest of 4 siblings, 2 older brothers and an older sister. The eldest are twins, brother and sister. The oldest brother was my idol, for lack of a better word. I'm sure most younger brothers out there can relate to this. He was classic rebellious teen growing up, but he was also sad. At the time, I never saw that. I saw a cool, tough guy that I wanted to be just like. Well, he and my parents didn't get along at all. So eventually he left for the Marines and to serve in Afghanistan. I don't know if he actually saw combat or not, but I was told that he lost friends over there. Just 1 month before both of our birthdays, my family got word that he's acting erratic. He's back in the States, don't recall where. Dad is worried, I'm confused. Shortly after, a man comes to our house. He's dressed in military uniform. Dad tells me that my brother is to wait upstairs. I have no clue what's going on, but I'm sure that you can guess. Well, the man leaves my dad, calls me and my brother down together, sits us down, and tells us that our older brother has died. I didn't cry at the moment. I remember that. I remember being in shock at the sound of the words. Disbelief, hands shaking. I go upstairs and I fall to the floor and cry. Through all of the mayhem of having lost
What was so funny?
your pick it up comment, Stripes. Through all the mayhem of having lost a family member and planning the funeral, neither of my parents remembered to tell me that my brother had killed himself. That's how he died. I didn't know how to process that information. I don't know if it changed anything. I remember seeing him in uniform in his casket. It was strange. It looked like him, but somehow not at all. I broke down immediately at the sight of him. I think what was worse was seeing him than actually being told. It's like all doubt about the incident was gone. Today I'm having trouble moving forward with my life. I don't have any relationships, really. I don't have any aspirations. I sleep like 12 hours a day or 12 hours a night. Mental issues suck. One day at a time, I guess, right? So this was around 25 years ago. I had tree trimmers out at my house for the last 2 days. I lived alone at the time. I did have the presence of mind to set out these men's shoes on the porch, but after being there for 2 days for someone who was paying attention, it was pretty obvious I was a single woman. The night the crew finished up, I was upstairs in bed. It was late, around 1 a.m. My car was in the driveway. My bedroom light was on, so it was obvious someone was home. I was in bed reading when I heard a noise downstairs. It was a familiar noise, but I couldn't quite place it. I laid there listening and heard it again, followed by the sound of things falling onto the floor. It hit me then what the noise was. One of my window screens being pushed open, followed by books I had lined up along the windowsill falling. I was totally frozen in fear for a moment. Just laying there with all my senses on high alert, then I heard another thumping noise. What I assume was the sound of feet landing on the wooden floor. There was someone in my fucking house. That's when I grabbed the bat I had next to the bed, and I went to grab the phone. This was before cell phones, back in the time of landlines and cordless phones. That's when I realized that I had the cordless downstairs. I locked my bedroom door, started screaming that I knew they were there, that I had a gun, and I was on the phone with the police. I proceeded to pretend like I was on the phone with 911. I opened the bedroom window and removed the screen, getting it ready in case I had to jump out of my window. I don't know if it was me opening the window or maybe my screaming, but something set off my neighbor's dogs. They started barking and moving around, which turned on the motion sensor lights in my neighbor's backyard. I went to stand at my door with my ear pressed against it listening, still continuing my fake 911 conversation. It was an old house with wood creaky stairs, so if they started up the stairs I would definitely hear them, but it was dead silent. Then I heard a scuffing noise, the sound of the window downstairs rattling, followed by the sound of someone running beneath my bedroom window. Something scared him off, and he jumped back out the window that he came in. I went to my window and looked out, but I couldn't see anything. Whether it was me yelling that I was armed, pretending like I was on the phone with the police, or the dogs barking, I don't know. I had to get the cordless phone to call the police. I knew where it was, sitting right on the kitchen table. I stood there listening for a long time. Fucking terrified. I really thought I might have a heart attack. I was shaking. My heart was beating so fast. I had so much adrenaline running through my body. Finally, I unlocked my door, had the bat at the ready, and crept down the stairs into the kitchen, grabbed the phone. Then I took off and ran upstairs, 2 at a time, locked the door, called 911. They came, they inspected my house. I was too scared to stay after that. I felt lucky to scare him off. But it was also terrifying. He knew I was home. He wanted me. If I hadn't still been awake, if I hadn't heard things may have ended very differently. When I was a kid, I got sick. It was one of those 1 in a million disorders that require months of hospitalization just to diagnose. As I was being bullied at school at the time, I actually enjoyed the hospitalization. I got to do my work in peace, chill out all day, read books, all for the low, low price of having my blood taken and getting run through the MRI tube. No one bothered me. I was alone. About halfway through my stay in the what the fuck ward, I got a bag full of get well cards from my school. It was obvious that the teacher made the class do it as an exercise and didn't supervise. Maybe 2 of those cards were legitimate well wishes, the rest were abuse. I had 30 lovingly handmade cards, all telling me no one missed me, how everything was better with me gone, how they'd hoped I'd die, so that they would never have to see me again. I hid the cards under my mattress and pretended they didn't exist. That was the first time I remember thinking, maybe they're right. Maybe the world is better off without me in it. I know, I think so. About myself. I lived in an old farmhouse at the end of the big, long dirt road, so the school bus would drop me off at the end and I'd walk the rest of the way by myself. One afternoon, as 6-year-old me rounds the curb that led to my house, I caught it. It was like a fly, and I clapped it and caught it. Now that deserves a tip. I'm kidding. I lived in an old farmhouse at the end of a long dirt road, so the school bus would drop me off at the end, and I'd walk the rest of the way by myself. One afternoon, as 6-year-old me rounded the curb that led to my house, I noticed that my dad's truck was parked on the side of the road. Thinking only, cool, Dad's home, I began an excited sprint towards the house. Excuse me. The first thing I noticed was that my mom's car was gone. It had never been gone before, but I figured Dad was there instead. Only seconds later, as I hopped up to the porch, did I notice that something was really, really wrong. There were bloody footprints of all types and sizes. Going up the front steps, turning back, I noticed that they went all the way down the concrete path to where the yard met the road. Upon closer inspection, there was blood everywhere. It was splattered on the walls and windows of the porch posts. Little bits were dried up and stuck between the holes in the mesh of the screen door. I still opened it. The front door had less blood than the screen door did, but the doorknob was all bloody. I turned it anyways and found it was locked, but the blood was still wet. Very calmly and practically, I wiped it off on my pants and went around to the opposite side of the house to check the back door, but I found I couldn't get it to open because of all the screen doors being latched. At about this point, I also noticed that my dogs were missing. 2 big golden retrievers who were so happy to see me every day, typically, that they'd knock me over or more, were nowhere to be found. I was completely alone. Just to be sure, I made what felt like a very long walk around the perimeter of the house and the yard, and finding no evidence of my family and no hints as to where they had gone, I picked up my backpack and started to walk down the hill towards the road, noting that my own footprints now joined the multiple sets tracking around the property in blood. Strangely enough, it's the part that comes next that still haunts me. I don't know why I was able to remain so level-headed and emotionless upon finding my house abandoned and in such a state, especially with my dogs missing, especially with all the blood everywhere. Maybe I was in shock. But after realizing that my parents hadn't left a note, I decided that the best course of action would be to start walking until I found somebody that could help me. I know I didn't process it appropriately because I was only 6, but I do remember having weird, hollow feelings while thinking, my parents are dead. My brother is dead. It's just me now. An adult might describe it as being in shock, but all I remember is how accepting I was of the whole thing. It didn't really occur to me to cry or to lose my cool, nor did I really want or have much of a plan. I mostly focused on walking, looking down the dirt path and directly at the gravel as I kicked up the dust with each step. For a couple of hours, even as the sun dropped low to the horizon with no street lights to guide me, I kept walking without thinking or feeling much of anything. I'm not sure it even occurred to me that I should be really upset. My parents found me about a quarter of a mile down the highway from the road we lived on. Headed towards the Methodist church where I had a children's choir sometimes. It turned out that my dad had run over one of our dogs with his truck, and instead of passing out or falling down, this dumb old dog did the opposite. She ran all over the place, making a huge ordeal just to catch up to her, keep her still. To make matters worse, our older male dog was very protective of her and wouldn't let my parents take her away to the veterinary care. So in all of their rush and confusion to save this poor dog's life, they swooped my baby brother and both our dogs and put him in Mom's car and hauled ass to the closest animal hospital, which was in another county. I still wonder how it would have turned out if they'd taken just a few seconds to leave their kid a post-it note, or better yet, stopped at the nearest neighbor's house to ask them to wait up for the school bus. But nope, they had priorities, and as the middle child, I was rarely at the top of that list. When I told my mom that a teacher at school was doing inappropriate When I told my mom that a teacher at school was doing inappropriate things to me, she called me a liar. She told me that nobody would ever want to touch me. She also told me that if I tried to get him in trouble, that when I went to court, I would have to tell a room full of people what happened. And that even if they believed me, they would think that I was lying if I told them that I didn't like it. I was 8 years old and just told her that I was kidding, because between the predator telling me that if I said anything, my grandma would die, and my mom scaring me into remaining quiet, I believed I didn't have a choice. The worst part is the continued abuse. He wasn't caught for another 8 years, probably harming God knows how many more children. As an adult, this led to me having no concept of self. The only reason I have my first girlfriend is because she pursued me. And after I lost my virginity, I found that the attention of females made me feel really good until I had an orgasm, and then I was filled with guilt and shame. I learned when I started drinking around 18 that I could have that attention of a female while drinking. And the guilt and the shame was lessened because I drank. This brought on a 5-year span where I would get drunk every weekend and have as many sexual partners as possible just to feel good about myself for a while. At that time, I didn't realize why I was doing this. I just thought I liked to party. When I was 22, I started dating a girl who I had been friends with for a few years. She had also been molested as a child and had similar feelings. After sex, we would have a ritual of showering together, and I learned to have some self-esteem. This beautiful woman loved me, and I felt I deserved to be happy, and sex could be healthy. We got married on our 4-year anniversary and divorced 5 months later when she fell in love with one of our co-workers. Things quickly devolved again and went back to more of the same. Finally, I came to the conclusion of what I was doing and talked to a therapist. I met a nice lady, and we have 2 kids now. While I can reason all of the things I've said above are unhealthy, I've been capable of a healthy physical relationship in the past. I still don't necessarily look at sex with her as enjoyable. It's something that I need to do now, and then to maintain our relationship. This is incredibly sad because I love her. I love my family. There's a part of me that always will want to get drunk and have sweet, guilt-free sex with someone so that I can feel wanted again. But some things are obviously more important. It's not as bad as the others, but when I was 12, I had a bad year at school. I was being bullied. I was having a hard time with my schoolwork. I only had 3 or 4 friends in school, and there were about 300 in the school altogether. Add this to the fact that I lived with my mother, who wasn't home a lot, and I was left to fend for myself most nights. As a result of this, I started feeling isolated, really isolated, left out from, well, everything. My grades dropped. I acted out, probably for attention. Skipped school when I could. I wasn't a bad kid. I just wasn't able to cope with the situation I was in. I'm getting sidetracked. I got assigned to a Saturday school as a punishment. They went to my school. Handed out discipline was if you missed Saturday school, you would get suspended. Wasn't so much of a little shit that I didn't understand what getting suspended was a big deal, so I told my mother that I got Saturday school. She was angry. Then she told me I'd better find a way to get there. I ended up having to walk 5 miles and then take a bus to get to Saturday school. I get to school and I'm late. I tried to tell the teacher that I had to take the bus to get there, but he didn't believe me. So I get assigned extra work to do. I spend 6 hours sitting at a library table by myself, doing math problems, spelling sheets, writing essays. Not to mention I'm exhausted because I had to wake up at 5 in the morning to start walking to the bus stop. 3 p.m. rolls around and I'm dismissed. It's cold and pouring rain outside. I have to walk to the bus stop and stand out in the rain. Damn near half an hour waiting for the fucking bus. This moment is emblazoned in my mind. It was a moment of clarity in my life, like nothing else. I remember feeling so alone, so uncared for, deserted by everyone, and I started crying at the bus stop. This taught me that no one was ever going to look out for you unless you did it yourself. You can't ever be helpless, because if you are, you'll be left alone to wither away and die, and no one will care or come to help you. All in all, it taught me a lot about relying on myself. After this incident, I actually changed a lot about my life. Pretty much everybody I meet, I have trust issues with. And I can't stand not having a plan for something. I need to know what my next move is. Hope it doesn't sound whiny. But for me, it's just the way it is. Here's the last one. A short one. My parents divorced when I was young. Before I started school at age 4, my dad used to come get me every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, every other weekend. One Wednesday, he called my mom and said he couldn't get me that day. Had to stay late at work. I was a daddy's girl and took this very hard. I remember crying and pleading for him to pick me up. My mom took that as, I don't want to spend time with mom. She pretended to call an orphanage, made me pack all my clothes up in boxes, threw me out on the porch to wait for the orphanage truck to pick me up. I was a 4-year-old girl, sitting outside alone on the porch in a bad neighborhood, for at least an hour, convinced I'd never see my dad again. At the end, she told me I was so bad even the orphanage didn't want me. She also made me take weird pills one time. My dad has confirmed that I never had an illness that would require this. I remember they made me shaky. I think this was 2nd grade. I still can't take pills to this day. I'm 21 years old now. Haven't spoken to my mother in 9 years. Good riddance, crazy emotional bitches. You're allowing the reckless and, no thought comments of a 4-year-old injure your feelings and your emotions. Women are fucking terrible. And that should be the really scary part of this fucking list, is that they're everywhere. Everywhere. I hope you all enjoyed this list. I want to thank my patrons for doing what they do. And I want to thank my sponsors for being gangster too. Special shout out to Sadeja, who became a sponsor today. Special recognition to Stripes for her $10 donation tonight. I appreciate you. And I recognize everybody in the stream chat, and thank you for being here as well. Hope you all have a wonderful night. And I'm gonna try my best to stay out of trouble. You should do the same.
The offering in the name of Saint Faith.
What was that? Something read something, so it was a donation in excess of $10. Fuck. How do I open this shit? Jesus. Oh, it was a donation from Fat Man saying that he did this in Faith's name, apparently. I appreciate you, Fat Man. You're 60. That's pretty dank, homie. Oh boy, that's the SSD right there. That's pretty amazing, Fat Man. That's pretty amazing. But I think I'm gonna be the one to pay for the SSD. I need to try and put this towards something. I hope that you guys enjoyed that. You didn't hear this from me because I really want to try and make more of those and make them better than what they were. It's so strange. I feel like I need to choose a path when it comes to this channel, and that's either making content that's going to appeal to people to get more exposure, or making content that's very good that, because of the way that YouTube is, will likely not find an audience at all. Funny the way the world works. I love you all, and you'll see me sooner than you expect. I got a lot of craft to do tomorrow, but hopefully I'll be able to get it out of the way. What the fuck?
Dolphin Booty Pornhub.
Dolphin Booty Pornhub for real, homie. Damn, the frame rate dipping in this bitch. What the hell? Oh my god. Oh my god. Thank you. Damn, Kevin. I appreciate that shit. Man, you guys. You know, I didn't think I would need the soundboard tonight, balls. But, you know. Oh yeah, how do you guys feel about the other noises? Because you know when somebody subscribed, it was like a heartbeat or something. There's a different noise for super chat, and then there's like a noise for the donation that's like the lightning striking. Ooh, Michael Davis says, Kyle, I downloaded Cuphead, but I don't have a capture equipment. What do I do? Why would you need capture equipment? What are you playing it on 360? If you have an Xbox One can stream directly to YouTube. Figure it out, homie. You're on the internet. Type in how to and then the thing that you want to do. I believe in you. Yeah, I definitely misspelled lingerie. I don't care. Oh my god. I wish I knew how to get the output to do better. I keep saying encoding overloaded. Huh. Faith said whatever it is. No, she's not even paying attention. Guys, I love you to death, and I think I need to go attack some food. I also need to clean this damn room. It'll be easy. All I need. Is a plastic bag. I love you all. Thank you so much for tonight. You guys are unstoppable. Incredible. Everything that I want. And I'll see you tomorrow. So hit me with some suggestions. Leave them as just comments on videos. You know I read everything. And then I'll see you guys soon.